Well, today is April. Today is April 4th, 2008, and we are here with Gordon Rackett in East Marion. I am Robin Emont, and I will be interviewing Gordon. And Barbara Fons is on camera, and we are taping this for the East Marion History Project. Hello, Gordon.
Greetings.
How are you?
Fit as a fiddle.
Good, very good. So I understand that you were born and raised here in East Marion.
Yes.
Um,
Born in the Greenport Hospital,
mm-hmm.
just as the sun came up on May 6, 1927.
Okay. So you got a birthday coming up, I guess.
Pretty soon.
And your family was originally from East Marion?
Yes. My daughter traced it back, excuse me. My daughter traced it back to 1690. So they were here then. I don't know if they were here before that.
In East Marion?
East Marion area.
Or Oyster Ponds, I guess it was called then. Wow, that's unbelievable. And the family originally came over from England?
They came from England.
Mm-hmm.
From where, I don't know.
And they settled right here on the East End? They didn't?
I think, I have an idea they came from Connecticut.
Oh.
A lot of these people came over from New Haven
Mm-hmm.
or New London.
I was reading somewhere where they called going to the city was going to New London, Connecticut.
Mm.
You didn't go to Manhattan. You took a boat over.
Yeah, that was the easiest way
Mm-hmm.
to get here. You know.
Wow. And what type of work did your family do?
Fishermen, trap fishermen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what generation of trap fishermen are you?
Oh my goodness, I don't know. Way down the line.
A lot. Going back to the 16, 1700s.
Way back.
Wow. Okay, so you had a big family or a small family?
No, it was just my sister and myself.
Okay.
Yeah.
And who's older?
She.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is she still alive, or?
Yeah, she lives out in Illinois, South Central Illinois.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll have to send her a copy of this.
Yeah.
She'll be proud of her brother. So what was it like growing up in East Marion? What did you do as kids? What kind of entertainment? What was school like?
It was perfect. It was quiet. The village itself was quiet because there was no traffic. Once in a while a car would go past, but that was once in a while. And of course, a lot of people had chickens, so you could always hear roosters and so forth. And cows. Some families had a cow. Those kind of sounds. That's all. Birds.
When you say car went by every once in a while, was that every 10 minutes, every half hour?
Half hour or an hour.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is...
There wasn't, there weren't many cars. Not many people had a car.
And did your family have chickens and cows and animals?
We never had a cow, but we always had chickens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you grew up on fresh eggs.
Yeah, I had ducks and some turkeys.
That's great.
Yeah.
And your father was a trap fisherman.
Yeah.
And tell us what that was like. What was his day like? Did it start very early in the morning?
Yeah, they went out. They went, well, depending on the weather, of course. Their traps were over on Gardiner's Island. They trapped in Cherry Harbor and Bostic Bay. And they usually didn't get home too late because in the summertime when they were fishing, they could pretty well regulate the time that, there was a certain amount of work to be done. And they were back in Greenport or East Marion by probably 5 o'clock or thereafter, a little bit thereafter.
And what time did they start out in the morning?
In the summertime, they didn't start too early because there wasn't as much work as there is other times of the year. Mm-hmm. In the springtime, they'd have to be mending twine and driving stakes and things like that. So they would really work long days.
Wow. And did you have chores to do to help the family?
Well, I had to keep the wood box full. We had a wood-burning kitchen range and a kitchen for heat and for cooking, so I had to keep the wood box full. I had to take care of the chickens and those kind of things.
Mm-hmm. And what did your sister do?
I don't know.
You were too busy to know what she was doing.
She did stuff in the house with my mother.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And where did you live? Where was your house?
Well, they never owned. My family never owned a house. They always rented.
Mm-hmm.
So we lived in several different houses in East Marion. Moved about four or five times.
What was the first house that you remember living in?
First house I remember was right to the east of the chapel, Nate Dickerson's old house.
Mm-hmm.
We lived downstairs, and Kenneth Vale and his family lived upstairs. It was Kenneth Vale's house at that time.
So that's almost on the waters, on the lake, I guess.
Yeah, it's right on the hill there over the lake.
Wow. And then where'd you live after that?
We moved across the road to William Rackett's house,
Mm-hmm.
which was just to the west of the school, east of now what is Stars Road.
Mm-hmm.
That white house in there.
And he was a uncle?
He was a skipper. He ran a schooner back and forth between New Haven and the East End and wherever else they had freight to take.
Mm-hmm.
And they had three sons. One of them, Horsey Rackett, was the bank president there in Greenport eventually. And Stubby Rackett, Herb Rackett, owned a drugstore in Greenport.
Mm-hmm.
And Ben Rackett turned out to be a musician. He played organ in one of the New York churches for quite a few years.
Wow. And he was an uncle, or?
They were cousins.
Okay.
Yeah, some kind of cousins.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So it sounds like your family pretty much started their own businesses.
Yeah.
Whether it was fishing or...
Yeah.
or
They did. Most of them followed the water one way or another.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Now, I was reading some things where it seems like a lot of times people were going over from here to Montauk. Is that true?
Yeah, they did. The Vale family were all fishermen, and they did their fishing over on the north side of the South Fork there, right back by Fort Pond Bay and around there over Montauk.
Mm-hmm.
Charlie Brown, Willis Brown, Myron Brown. I worked for Myron Brown. They fished along the stretch to the west of Montauk, between Montauk and that big harbor.
Oh, yeah.
And in the summertime, a lot of times the families would go over picking beach plums and so forth, make a big picnic of it.
Oh, that sounds great.
Yeah.
Was fishing different then than it is now in terms of what was in the waters?
Yes, there were fish in the water at that time. Yeah, they many times made big hauls. There was a lot of fish. They shipped fish in 200-pound boxes, 200 pounds of fish and ice, and put it on a train over there at Montauk or Promised Land or Greenport. Nowadays they ship fish in a little cardboard box, wax cardboard box, like vegetables.
So did you pick up these 200-pound boxes?
Well, two of us could pick them
Wow.
up.
So was that going on to the Long Island Railroad?
Yeah.
Wow.
Later on, trucking took over from the railroad, and they went in straight to the market on Reach Brothers and Squeezy's trucks.
And did your family also take fish across to Connecticut?
No, they didn't.
Okay. So when you said that your uncle was on a schooner that would go to New Haven, what was he doing?
I don't really know, but I think that a lot of it was oysters, and I think a lot of it was produce. Halleck from Orient did a lot of that produce shipping on the old Hallioke, his old boat. And New Haven was for some reason a convenient place for him to go. I think because the railroad came in there,
Right.
and there was good oyster grounds over there.
Was your family, all these Rackets that were in East Marion, were people close?
Yes, you mean friendly?
Right.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Everybody in East Marion, it was like a huge family. Uh, Everybody wasn't in love, but I mean, but but everybody cared for everybody, and they looked out for each other. If one of them was down on their luck, they'd get help.
I've heard that when the crops were ready, sometimes the fishermen would come and help, and then sometimes the farmers
Yeah.
would help the fishermen when
Yeah,
they needed help.
yeah, they did. They swapped labor around. Yeah.
Hmm. And would they swap, would you barter?
Yeah,
You get
people,
farm vegetables and you give them fish?
yeah, people did that. My father always brought fish home for the neighbors. And the neighbors, when they were farmers, when they slaughtered pigs, we'd get pork chops and sausage and so forth.
Wow,
Yeah.
sounds good.
Yeah.
You went to the East Marion School, I guess.
Yes.
And tell us what that was like.
Well, there are 2 rooms, 4 grades per room, and we started when we were 5 years old. No kindergarten. It was excellent education because 4 grades knew what everybody was doing. So if you were in the 5th grade, for instance, by the time you got to the 8th, you pretty well knew what you had to know by the time you got there. And when we went to Greenport, to high school, we were always a year ahead of the Greenport kids.
Wow.
Two teachers. Each teacher taught 4 grades, all subjects.
And do you remember a favorite teacher that you had?
Oh yeah, George Morton. He was teacher of the big room, as they called it.
Mm-hmm.
5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. And he was also the principal of the school.
And that's...
And we played a lot of baseball, regular hardball, and he pitched for both sides. He was a good pitcher.
And that's George Morton's father, right?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
I heard, speaking of baseball, I heard about night baseball games that would happen over on Old Orchard Lane.
Yeah, they had a league. Orion had a team, East Marion, Greenport had 2 teams, and there was, I think, one from Southold. And yeah, the ball diamond at one time was down on Old Orchard Lane. Before that, it was right over here by the corner of where Gillette Drive comes out.
Oh.
Walsing had a truck pickup place there for produce, and behind there was a ball diamond.
And you played at night?
Yeah, well, they didn't have lights. They played until they couldn't see the ball.
Mm-hmm. Someone said at one of our meetings that the cars would circle the field and they'd shine the lights on
They
it.
might have done that. Usually by that time I was home.
You were tired, right?
Well, yeah.
What other games did you play when you were a child?
Oh, we played kick the can and hide and seek and Red Rover. I can't remember the names of them all, but they were all a lot of running, a lot of fun.
A lot of running,
Yeah.
a lot in people's backyards and in open fields.
Yeah, that's one thing. Everybody owned, every piece of property was owned by somebody, but nobody was conscious of property lines. We all just walked and went where we wanted to go. Nobody gave it a second thought.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people didn't care if you stepped on the grass.
Right, right. What about holidays? What were the holidays like?
Well, summer holidays were always a picnic down the bay.
Mm-hmm.
Winter holidays were, well, Christmas, I guess. Christmas, Thanksgiving, they were either a big church service and then a big meal, and a family together in the house, you know. Just a nice day.
And do you remember what types of presents you would get for Christmas?
Yeah, we didn't get much because there was no money. My family had to save and scrimp and so forth. Well, a lot of the people did. So I remember almost every year that little cardboard box. It was always a jackknife.
Oh.
Yeah.
So you got a new jackknife every year?
Got a new jackknife. Well, every other year, I guess.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what would you do with that?
Well, make whistles. We used to make whistles and make little boats and play knives. We had a game called Knives, and you flip your knife into the dirt, and wherever it's stuck, you draw a line across. And the biggest part of it was your property. And then somebody else would do the same thing, and just to see who could wind up with the most land.
Sounds like Risk or one of those
Yeah.
games.
One of the girls got it in the foot one day.
So the boys and girls played together?
Yeah, the boys played knives and marbles, and the girls, I don't know what in the world the girls did, but I didn't pay too much attention.
They probably played house.
Yeah.
How has East Marion changed over the years?
Well, a couple of big changes. One is the influx of people after 1950. It's just so populated now, it's unbelievable. And house building, house construction has changed the appearance of it a lot. There were no houses, almost no houses except on the main road. Everything else was woods and farm lots. There were some houses down in what's now Gardeners Bay Estates, but they were like summer cottages. And 2 or 3 up in the Sound, but almost nothing.
So all the action was on the main road?
All the action, yeah. And it was a regular town highway back then, 2-lane road. I remember when it was, I was a little kid when they put the concrete road in. Before that it was macadam. And now it's a thoroughfare for the gambling casinos, but back then it was just a little road. People went to Orient, or they went to Greenport, and they walked usually. So I used to sit up in a tree just to see who was walking by.
So were there, did people not use horses as transportation very much?
No, horses, they were still using horses for farming when I was a kid, but not for transportation. For transportation, they...
You told me once about the trees being planted on the main road. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well,
I guess they're maple trees?
Yeah, my father and one of his brothers planted all those trees from the Sound Avenue, or Rocky Point Road they call it now, to the east, all the way down the road for 2 or 3 property lengths. And then before that, there were black cherry trees. And they were planted a long time ago, because I remember the last one, and it had a trunk on it. It must have been 3 feet through.
Wow.
Nice,
where was that?
Nice cherries. That was in front of what is now 2 houses east of you. Kind of, I don't know the names of people. Kind of across from where the...
We call them the honey people.
Oh.
You know, the people that used to sell honey in the brick house next to the Jacobs?
Oh, yeah.
Around there.
Yeah, that's right there, right by that driveway.
Right,
yeah,
right.
Yeah. That house that was there was moved over to Bridgehampton. And that was another old Rackett house.
It sounded like they moved houses around quite a bit then.
They did. They moved. Yeah, they could do it because there weren't no wires or anything and it was cheaper to move them than it was to build them.
And would they do it by boat most of the time?
If they had to go like to Orient but a lot of times, I guess usually they drag them across the lot because they didn't move them too far. mostly.
How did they move them?
They put them on skids, jacked them up, put them on skids, and they had oxen or horses, and then later on tractors to pull them. Yeah.
When we interviewed Jen Salmian, she talked about a house being moved, and it sounded a lot like when you moved our outhouse,
Oh.
which was, well, except they used grease
Yeah.
in the road
Mm.
and just pulled it along on this
Yeah.
slippery road.
Yeah, just waited for it to rain.
Right.
Yeah.
Get that right mix of
Yeah.
water and grease. Do you remember, I'm not sure when the old oyster factory closed. Is that in your lifetime or?
Yes,
a long time
we
ago?
we were living here. It was, I'm just guessing now, it was probably around late 50s.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And do you remember playing there or working there or?
Well, no, when they first started, General Foods bought that place and built the place.
Huh?
And when they first started in, there was a beautiful freshwater pond, Wiggins Pond, just to the east of the oyster plant. It was just lovely. It had pond lilies, you know, and fish and muskrats and beautiful. The sea ducks, saltwater ducks would come in from the bay and zip over that little thicket that was there and pop down in that fresh water, and they just had the best time in the world. And when General Foods dredged out for their basin in there, they pumped all that fill over into Wigginson's pond, and that was the end of it. That was the end.
Where was that pond located? About.
It's, I don't know how to tell you so you'd know, but it was, it was northeast or north of the present oyster plant, not far on the same property.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was a booming business, I guess.
Oh, it was. It was what they'd shuck oysters there and sell them in cans, you know, open. They sell them in the shell in barrels. And later on, they got fancy, and they would fix them like oyster Rockefeller and oyster this, that, and the other thing, prepared to the restaurants. And the shells all went by conveyor out on a heap because they planted those shells overboard for the new oysters to spat on, you know, to grow on. And the oyster shell heap was as big as that building.
Wow.
Yeah, and in the winter time, when it got covered with snow, it was ideal for sledding.
And I guess you went sledding there.
That was the only second hill in East Marion. The other one was between the church and where the old was. I don't know the name of those new people. Roy Brown, I think. Roy Brown's kids have a place there. And that was what we called a steepy, and that was a nice sledding hill. We could go down that hill and go all the way through the cattails out onto the lake. And it was fun. It was a lot of fun.
Wow. I bet not many kids can say they went sledding down an oyster shell hill.
No, not just a few around here. Yeah.
Were the oysters all shucked by hand, or was it
Yeah.
automation?
All by hand.
So they would hire a bunch of people. And
It was quite an operation. They had the oysters came in off the boats on a conveyor, and they dropped into a hopper. And this hopper, there was a guy upstairs. He'd crank it along. It was on rails, like a little railroad car. And over each opening bin, he'd open the bottom and fill up the bin. And there was colors, what they call colors. They'd cull them out, and openers. And they'd just stand there all day opening.
wow.
They got pretty good.
That sounds like hard work.
Mm.
Did you ever work at the oyster factory?
No.
Or you were busy out in
The
gardens?
only thing I did down there when they were building the place, we had that nice deep water to dive into off the spiles. And they were creosoted, And we didn't realize it, but, you know, we'd rub our eyes and so forth, and everybody was walking around with red eyes
Oh my
from
goodness.
the creosote.
Wow.
Yeah, they grew. They also, the women made clothes and they mended clothes and so forth. And so everybody, they depended on the store for the canned food and lard and sugar and butter and stuff like that. But any other stuff, they just didn't need it.
They grew it or caught it, huh?
Yeah, yeah,
So I guess there was a lot of canning and preserving.
yes.
Did
Yeah.
your mother do that?
Oh yeah, yeah. She had quite a stock. She used to put eggs down too in water glass, and so we'd have in the wintertime in cold weather chickens don't lay too well, so we'd have eggs for cooking. They were they didn't taste too well, so we didn't eat them fried or cooked like that, but we had them in mixed up food.
And how would
eggs.
she put them down? What did she do?
Well, she had a big clay crock about that big, and they had this stuff called water glass, and I used to know the chemical name of it, but I've forgotten. Anyway, you mix it with water, and then just simply submerge the eggs in it. And I suppose what it did was keep oxygen away from the shells.
And was this an open?
Yeah, it had a cover on the top, but you didn't need a cover.
Well,
Uh,
interesting. Now, so you were always a fisherman, but then did you have another career later on? Mike?
Yes, when I grew up, after high school, I went to aviation school down in Roosevelt Field for my mechanic's license. And I did half, it was a 13-month course. I did half of it. I got to really think. And then, I got one of my pals and said, "Come on, Dan, let's join the Navy and we'll stick together."
What year is this?
That was 1944.
Oh, so the war was going on.
Yeah, I graduated, let's see, the month after I graduated, I turned 17. And so that's when we tried to get in the Navy. And the Navy took him and sent me home because I'm nearsighted.
Oh, wow.
I tried to
So that whole stick together thing didn't work out too well.
That didn't work, no. So then I tried it with another fellow, one of my classmates. "Come on, Jim," so blah, 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 blah. And the Navy took him and sent me home. So, so then, I think I went fishing that fall, and when I turned 18 the following May, I registered for the draft and signed a card for immediate induction. And they give you about 2 weeks so your parents can have something to say about it. And so they took me, and I went in the service. When I got back, I took the other half of the aviation course, got my ticket, and searched all over for a job, couldn't find one. And eventually I did get a job over at West Hampton, the old dirt field over there, and worked there for a little over a year, and then worked for Mattatuck Air Base for pretty near 10 years.
Wow.
And then,
There was an air base in Mattatuck?
well, it wasn't an air base per se. It was a general repair station for civilian aircraft. We did good work. We had we did sheet metal, fabric, welding, inspections, painting, everything you can think of. And it was fun. It was good work. I learned a lot. And then I applied for a job up in Brookhaven Lab, got that, stayed there for 30 years and a half.
And what did you do there at Brookhaven?
I was a mechanical technician in the synchrotron project.
What's that?
It's, it's atom smashing. And it was a clean mechanics job.
Mm-hmm.
Well, our group built and installed measuring devices and target devices and so forth for the proton beam in the ring. And it was nice because there was a lot of pneumatics, and there was nice machine work to do and things like that. It was good work. Nice job.
Are you still in touch with any of your coworkers from?
Yes, one. He's down in Florida.
Oh.
And I
okay.
hear now and then from some of them, but not really closely in touch.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go back to what East Marion looked like when you were growing up. You said there were a lot of woods, and what kind of flowers and trees and things like that would there be?
Well, the woods were mostly oak and hickory and red cedar. Other types, of course, in also. But in the spring, the woods were absolutely beautiful because they were full of laurel, and the laurel would bloom, and people would make special trips, take walks on Sunday just to get up and see all that beautiful stuff. And there were places where lady slippers would bloom, and maypinks, trailing arbutus, things like that.
Lilacs, I bet.
Not in the woods, no. There were hedgerows between all the fields, which is something we don't have anymore. And that was great because it was full of wildlife. Hedgerows are perfect for little animals and birds and so forth. And it was good.
Did you hunt at all?
Yeah, I was an idiot.
I doubt that.
Like most young boys or young men, I got real good with a gun. And so I gave my double-barrel 12 to my cousin and bought a single because that's all I needed, but one shot.
Wow. Were there
And
as many deer back then as there are now?
There were no deer.
Really?
Not a deer, no. Little animals, raccoons and possums and weasels and rabbits and squirrels and pheasants and quail.
So when do you think the deer arrived, and how did they get here?
I think they came over from Shelter Island because they're good swimmers. That's the only thing I can think of, because they didn't come from the west. We probably started seeing deer tracks in the 50s, late 50s. I don't know.
And were there as many as there are now?
No. Once in a while you'd see their tracks, but you wouldn't see them.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the hedgerows were, what, like privet or?
Yeah, it would grow up weeds and briars and little trees and.
So in between everybody's property, there would be these hedgerows.
Yeah.
But you could just cross over into people's property and it didn't bother people.
Yeah.
You also were with the fire department, is that right?
Yeah, for a long time. Actually, I'm still on the rolls, but I'm not active.
I was told that the last time there was a fire in East Marion was in 1970 something. Does that seem right to you?
No. I don't think. Oh, you mean maybe a grand fire? Oh, maybe so. The big manor house down on the end of the road here, down Cleves Point, that burned. That was awesome.
Oh, really?
The owner asked the fire department if they would burn it down, and we thought that would be a swell idea for a fire school. We could set that thing ablaze as many times as we wanted to, and learn how to contain it and so forth. But at that time, the oyster plant was still operating, and they said, they told us that their insurance would be canceled if we did that, so we couldn't do it. And not too long after that, it went up in flames.
And how long did it take to get that out?
We couldn't.
Oh, it just
No,
burned to the
because it
ground?
was doused with kerosene or gasoline or something.
Boy, I bet you could see that real good over in Shelter Island, right?
Yeah, you could feel the heat.
Did
from
they
it.
ever find out who did it?
Yeah, it's pretty well suspected who did it, but nobody, I don't think anybody bothered to investigate, because I doubt that there was any insurance claim or anything like
Mhm.
that.
And was there a lot of good camaraderie in the fire department?
Always, yeah. That's why a lot of people joined it and really enjoyed it, because it was a real nice, close organization. And that's, for generations, I think that's one of the things that was so nice about East Marion, and probably all the small villages up and down the North Fork and South Fork and Long Island. Those little groups in East Marion, they had the Church Social Society for the women, and there was another women's group, a missionary group, and they had a clubhouse in the chapel upstairs. It was nice. It was like a little home.
Wow.
And the men had the gun club in the fire department, and seems to me something else.
So when did you go into the fire department? What year?
19, let me see, about 1940, maybe 48 or 46.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Was the, well, I guess was the War Memorial Post Office there at that time?
No, that was built around 1949, I think.
And that was
49.
just for World War I and World War II.
Mm. And then the Vietnam War came along, and we added a plaque in there.
Mm-hmm.
In Korea.
You are involved in the church, is that right?
Yeah,
The East Marion Community Church.
I was.
Mhm.
Now it's Orient Congregational.
Oh, okay. So the church, we've seen pictures where there were two steeples, and it was
Yeah.
quite a grand-looking place.
I think it was around 1905 when that was remodeled. It was a single steeple up until then. In 1905 they put the second one on for whatever reason, I don't
I
know.
was just going to ask.
And it had the old box pews in there, I'd like to see.
Mhm.
They took them out and modernized the inside.
And wasn't that a Baptist church?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And what about the windmill that you see in the picture right next to the church?
Yeah, that was on a hill where Nate Dickerson's house is.
Mm-hmm.
And see, if I thought long enough, I could probably recall when it was taken out, but I can't tell now.
Was it still around during your time when you were there?
No, it was gone by then.
Was it for grain? And
Yeah, they milled a lot of wheat in that mill, and also the one down at Dam Pond, up until the very early 1900s, and then steam-powered steel mills, not steel mills, but instead of the stone ground mill, they would grind it with steel grinders.
Mm-hmm.
They came in and could produce flour very cheaply, and they put the old millstones out of business.
the mill at Dam Pond,
Mm.
was that on the north side of the road or the south side of the road?
On the south side.
It was on the
Yeah.
south side, so it
Yeah.
was right at the entrance
Yeah.
over there. Wow.
I had a picture of that mill when it was still operating. A fellow named Terry was operating it, and that was around 1904 or 5, something like that.
I heard that burnt down also, right?
It may have, I don't know. I
Sounds
don't
like a
know.
lot of buildings got burnt.
Yeah. That was an easy
Where'd they
way
go?
to get rid
To
of
start
it.
over.
Mm.
Your family, I'm sure, told you about what East Marion was like when they were young.
Mm.
Did they say it was perfect then and now it's more crowded, or did
Well,
they like the way it was when you were a child?
well, they took it as it was. Actually, people were absorbed in surviving, you know, and there wasn't any change for generations. No change up until, like I say, after we all came home from the war. That's when it started changing.
And what caused that change, do you think?
Well, two or three things. One is this fellow Moses in New York started building roads. It made it easy to get out here. That's one big thing. And I don't know, something happened with all the millions of guys overseas in Europe and everywhere else. When they came back, I think maybe I don't know, they might have had a different attitude or something. But anyway.
They didn't want to live in a city, they wanted to
Yeah.
move out and have
Yeah.
space and be
Yeah.
in a rural
Yeah,
environment?
yeah. So, anyway, my folks didn't see the change because it hadn't happened. I saw it, and I didn't realize it until it was over, or well in progress. Yeah.
Well, when you say people were trying to survive, you were too young to, when the Depression happened. I mean, you
I
were
remember the
a
Depression.
baby, right?
Yeah. I was a little kid. I remember the Depression because I used to spend a lot of time watching my mother cook. I was aware of, even then when I was young, like maybe 6, 7 years old, I was aware that she was having a hard time, but she got a meal on her table 3 times a day.
Mm-hmm.
And people didn't complain because everybody was into it. You know?
And what would you eat back then?
Well, we had fish.
Mm-hmm. What kind of fish?
That's good. Swell bellies, swell fish, sea robins, which we like very much, then shiners, butterfish, porgies. The higher priced fish we didn't usually eat because that brought in some money.
What kind of fish was that?
Stripers and flatfish, blackfish and kingfish, all those good things.
Mm-hmm. So they would go to market.
Yeah, yeah.
And then, did you have potatoes with every meal, or what else would you have to eat?
We had potatoes. We had everything you could raise in the garden, all the
Mm-hmm.
beans and peas and carrots and root crops like beets and so forth. Had them, tomatoes. My mother put a lot of that stuff down cans or jars. She also made root beer, and every once in a while I'd hear one of them blow up down south.
That was exciting, I bet.
Yeah.
We heard some stories about Prohibition. Did you ever hear any stories about what went on during that time
I
period?
did. I don't remember it, but I remember hearing the stories about the gunfire up around the sound
Mm-hmm.
and cars and trucks in the middle of the night going through and so forth. One of the local fellas, whose name I won't mention, he's gone now anyway. He was a local payoff man for, I don't know, one of the big gangsters in New York that was into the bootleg business, illegal liquor, and he always was pretty well dressed and so forth. And some of the farmers and others had room in their barns and their buildings for storing this stuff, and they could get a little money that way.
Make a good buck.
Yeah.
I heard that the rum runners had much faster boats than the
Yeah.
Coast Guard, but the
Yeah.
Coast Guard had the guns, so
Mm.
that sort of evened things out a
Yeah,
little bit.
yeah. Oh, it was a big. It's right on the corner of.
What's that, Udell's?
Yeah, Udell. UDELL. Right on the corner of the main road and Old Orchard Lane, where Jim Rogers or Joan Rogers lives. That was Udell's house. And the post office was in the northeast room downstairs. I wrote that down because somebody asked me about it the other day. And
Some people that live at Peconic Landing told me they used to go to, I think it was Udell's boarding house in the summer. Does that make sense?
maybe she might have let rooms, you know. They might have read
And
it.
they have very fond memories
Uh-huh.
of East Marion.
Now, your family store
Yeah.
was down the road.
It was right across from Bay Avenue on the north side of the road. Did I give you a picture of that with a big steeple on the roof?
I have a picture of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah. It was a real pretty place.
So there was the Rackett store,
Yeah.
and what was it called? Was it called Rackett's, or I mean, what was the name of the store?
When I was a
Pepsi?
kid, now we're talking about two stores.
Mhm.
The Angels was Rackett's for quite a long time. And then this fella, George Noel, and his family came over from England and settled in East Marion. And he bought the store. And all my life, he was the proprietor of the store. And do you have this thing going now?
Mhm.
Oh.
I heard he had some good ice cream. People talk
He
about
did.
his ice cream.
He did. He had good ice cream. You could buy it loose or in a cone, and they had what they call mellow rolls, which was creamy, nice, and it was cylindrical in shape and had paper on the outside, and they had cones that were made to take that one particular thing. But if somebody had the money to buy loose ice cream, they would always try to get there when Mr. Noel was there and not his wife, because he would pack it down and he'd get it up so full you couldn't close it. And Hattie would pack it loose and leave air holes in it.
So they followed his schedule, I guess, when he
Well,
was in the store.
If she was in there, they'd just buy something else and turn around.
Come back.
Yeah.
I say, when's your husband going to be coming in?
Yeah.
And so what now? Tuttle's was down the road, or 'cause
BC
that was the other store,
Yeah,
right?
B.C. Tuttle was across from Bay Avenue. And B.C. Tuttle's house is the one across from the firehouse where all those pretty blue flowers are coming up.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
And
So they were across the street from each other. I thought they were on the same side of the street. They're
yeah,
across the
we're
street.
confused now.
Yeah.
What was across from each other?
BC Tuttle's?
B.C. Tuttle's on the north side of the road, and so was Mr. Knowles or Rackett's.
Okay, so they
Yeah,
were both on
yeah.
the north side.
And where was the firehouse?
Firehouse was down alongside the school, where the playground is now.
Mm-hmm.
And that was originally the Literary Society
Oh,
place. They had a library and so forth.
wow.
And that kind of petered out after a while, and I don't know why. The fire district was formed, and they used that for firehouse. It was a two-story building, which I have a picture of. And it served well until pretty near about 1950, and the sills were starting to go, and they had heavy trucks and all in there, so they had to build a new firehouse.
Wow. You had a relative that was the postmaster, I guess? In the
My mother-
1930s?
Oh, well, my grandfather, maternal grandfather, had the post office in his store, and I'm only assuming he was also the postmaster.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
And then Fred Rackett.
Fred Rackett was an Orient Rackett. He had 3 kids. You don't remember Mac, I don't think, Mac Rackett.
Mm-mm.
He ran that service station and garage at Greenport, just as you go into Greenport. Anyway, Fred was his father.
And he had something to do with the mail, I guess?
Yeah, he picked up the mail every day at the station in Greenport and delivered it to East Marion and Orient.
And what did he have, a
He had
truck or?
he had a gray Model A Ford, and I think he took the back seats out, put the mail bags in there.
And then apparently in 1939 or 1940 the post office was moved to someone's house.
So, oh, yeah, yes, it was in Udell's, and it moved down to Francisco's, and Francisco's is right on the bottom of the, almost across from the Cemetery Road, just this way up. Well, right next to Stars Road, where Stars Road is now, right next to there. There was a big house, grand house, with an upstairs, second floor porch with big columns like you see in southern pictures, you know, plantation type house. And it was vacant at the time the post office was there, but the post office used one room of it until the new place was built.
When did all these roads, Stars Road and all that development come in to play?
That was all with the big influx around 1950 or very shortly after.
When the people came in 1950, did they blend into the community or did they stay to themselves? What was that like?
They did. The first ones in that I can remember were Greeks. Nice people. And they really blended in with the whole thing. And then...
Did they live here year-round, or did they?
Yeah, okay. They did. They lived year round. They bought houses that were already here. A little later they started building and so forth. And then as the 50s and the 60s progressed, it just seemed like the doors opened up west someplace. And people felt it in rather fast but unnoticed, you know. And so every kind of people came. And I don't know what more to say.
But did you socialize with these people, or were they their own group? And
No, they blended in. A lot of them joined the fire department and so forth. So far as I know, none of them joined a church and had I think some of them went to the women's group. But no, they weren't ostracized at all.
What about going into Greenport? What was that
back
like?
then?
Did you go to the movies in Greenport?
Well, we didn't go to Greenport hardly at all, except to get a haircut. or something like that, maybe to get shoes repaired. And if somebody was going that way, we'd get a ride. Otherwise, everybody walked. We walked to Greenport. When I was in high school, we used to go to Greenport if we could get a dime together to get a soda. Sometimes we went to the movies, but very seldom. There wasn't much traffic between villages.
They were separate.
How did you get to when you went to Greenport High School? Did you have to walk there?
No, they had a bus.
Okay.
East Marion had a bus. It was privately owned, contracted out to the district. But it didn't stop at every house like it does now. They stopped at about 3 places in East Marion, and the kids would walk to those 3 places.
Where was your bus stop?
My bus stop was by the store, where Angels is.
And it's still a bus stop today.
Yeah. There was one family, Ketchums, lived up on the Sound, and those 2 kids walked down from the Sound every day, and walked back at night. And
Boy, in the winter that must have been cold.
yeah.
So you mentioned before sodas. Gert Reeves talked about Corwin's.
Yeah.
The best chocolate sodas you could ever have.
Yeah,
Is that your experience?
Corwin's drugstore, yeah.
Right, she would always hope that she had a dime left over for shopping.
Yeah, that was the place. Yeah, that was so special.
That was a big treat, though. That
Oh,
wasn't just
it
an
was.
every Saturday kind of
No,
thing.
no, that was very occasionally. Yeah.
What would you wish for East Marion's future? What would you like to see happen in East Marion?
Oh my goodness. Well, I can't wish for anything because what I would wish for would be totally impossible.
Well, let's have a fantasy. What would that be?
Well, of course, I'd like to see it return to what it was,
Mm-hmm.
which means you'd have to eliminate 3/4 of the houses in the place, and where would all the people go?
Right.
So it can't happen. No, I think it's lost. It's gone. It's I don't know what to say.
So going.
I think one of the biggest things best things that could happen was to get rid of that Orient ferry. To put the ferry up around Shoreham or someplace where it belongs, so that this would not be a thoroughfare for the casinos. Turn it back into a local road, that would be a big help.
Right. And what about the spa they want to build down here?
Man.
What are your thoughts about that?
That's atrocious. I don't see. I don't know if the town boards can prevent it. You know, because if these people meet all the requirements under the law, you can't keep them out. But I hope that that it never happens.
Mm-hmm.
It never happens.
When you were growing up here, what was the town government like?
Very relaxed.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, they had some town laws and so forth, but the police were local people.
Mm-hmm.
And if some kid made a mistake, they'd slap the back of their hand and give him a little talk to and let him go. They didn't haul him in and have him in for arraignment and that kind of stuff. But kids didn't do hurtful things back then. They raised the dickens.
Right.
We plugged up the chimney on the store one Halloween, so that when Gov Snow lit the fire, he had to open the front door to let the smoke out. But that was once.
Now,
Yeah.
when you did, well, I'm sure you didn't do things like that very often, but when
No.
you did, what kind of, were you punished? Were
Yes.
you?
If it came back to your family, you were punished. And everybody that I know of, that I grew up with, we all respected our parents.
Mm-hmm.
So we tried not to do what we weren't supposed to do.
Right.
Yeah.
I bet you couldn't get away with too much in East Marion without other people knowing about
No.
it.
No.
Okay, is there anything else, last thing you'd like to say?
Let me see my little thing there.
You had something down there about health insurance and...
Oh, yeah. I was going to mention that life was simple, really simple, because all you had to do was pay your food bills and so forth. There was no government entitlements, none. And there was none of that government oversight business.
Mm-hmm.
Probably most people had some kind of a basic fire insurance on their house, but that's all. And
It was simple.
yeah, it was very simple. So